I'm Brooke Mitchell, 27, and last month my sister Ashley told me I was socially unfit to attend her wedding. The text blindsided me completely. For years, my family has found my social anxiety and possible neurodivergence embarrassing, but this exclusion from my only sister's wedding cut deeper than anything before. As I stared at those cruel words on my phone, something inside me finally broke and then rebuilt stronger. So instead of fighting to be included, I booked myself a peace retreat. If you've ever felt like the family outsider, stick around. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe to join me on this journey of self-discovery. Growing up as Brooke Mitchell was like being a puzzle piece that never quite fit. From my earliest memories, I was always the different one in our picture-perfect family. While my sister Ashley effortlessly charmed everyone she met, I struggled with the most basic social interactions. Birthday parties were torture chambers of overstimulation. School dances were anxiety-inducing nightmares. And family gatherings? Those were complex obstacle courses where I inevitably knocked something over, said something inappropriate, or needed to escape to a quiet room. My parents, Karen and Frank Mitchell, weren't terrible people. They just never understood me. Mom was the neighborhood social butterfly who hosted dinner parties and ran the PTA with military precision. Dad was the charismatic sales executive whose clients became lifelong friends. Both were extroverts to their core, and they had created another perfect social specimen in my older sister Ashley. Ashley and I were close once, believe it or not. When we were very young, before social expectations became so important, she was my protector. There's this faded photograph in our family album of 5-year-old Ashley with her arm around 3-year-old me at the beach. I was crying because the waves were too loud, and she was glaring at the ocean like she could intimidate it into silence for my sake. I keep a copy of that photo on my nightstand as a reminder of what we once were to each other. But as we grew older, the gap between us widened. By middle school, Ashley had fully embraced her role as the family golden child. She was pretty, popular, and perfectly attuned to social cues I couldn't even perceive. Meanwhile, I was the awkward, bookish sister who flinched at loud noises and couldn't maintain eye contact during conversations. "Why can't you just be normal for once?" became Ashley's refrain whenever I embarrassed her in front of her friends. Sometimes she'd say it with a laugh, like it was a joke we were both in on. But I always heard the edge underneath. The Christmas when I was 15 marked the first major breaking point. Mom had invited 30 people to our house. Extended family, neighbors, Dad's colleagues. The noise, the smells, the constant demand for small talk, it was overwhelming. I retreated to the kitchen to help with dishes, seeking some quiet, when Aunt Patricia cornered me with questions about boys and college plans. Something in me snapped. I dropped a serving platter, shattering it across the tile floor, and fled upstairs in tears. Later that night, I overheard Ashley telling Mom, "She ruins everything." Christmas is supposed to be perfect. My high school graduation was another disaster. The crowded auditorium, the thunderous applause, the scratchy gown against my skin, it all became too much. I had a full panic attack right after receiving my diploma. Instead of celebrating at the planned family dinner, my parents had to take me home early. Ashley missed her friend's graduation party to sit in a restaurant with our disappointed relatives, and she didn't speak to me for 2 weeks afterward. College became my salvation. I attended Syracuse University, studying library science, far enough away from my hometown that I could reinvent myself. There, I found my people, other quiet, thoughtful students who didn't find my directness odd or my sensitivity excessive. For the first time, I didn't feel defective. But each return home for holidays reinforced the growing distance between my family and me. They saw my newfound confidence as further evidence of my peculiarity. College has made her even more herself. I once overheard Mom telling her friend Nancy on the phone, the pause speaking volumes. When Ashley met Jackson Lewis during her final year of law school, I knew immediately he was the one, not because I'm romantic, but because he checked every box on the Mitchell family-approved spouse list. Handsome, wealthy family background, corporate law career on the rise, socially adept, and most importantly, he found Ashley absolutely captivating. His family practically oozed old money and connections. The Lewises weren't just wealthy, they were influential in exactly the circles my social climbing sister had always aspired to enter. I was genuinely happy for her. Despite our differences, I wanted Ashley to have the life she desired. When she called to announce their engagement, I congratulated her sincerely and listened to her elaborate plans for what she called the society wedding of the season. "You'll be a bridesmaid, of course," she said, almost as an afterthought. "We'll need to find a dress that works with your sensitivities. Nothing too fitted, maybe? And we'll make sure you're not overwhelmed at the rehearsal dinner." I was touched by what I interpreted as consideration. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs in her tone, the way she was already framing me as a potential problem to be managed. For the next few months, I was included in the group emails and occasional wedding planning brunches. I sat quietly through discussions of floral arrangements and table settings, nodding at appropriate intervals and offering opinions only when directly asked. I thought I was doing well, adapting to the social demands of being in a bridal party. What I didn't know was that Ashley was keeping a mental tally of every odd thing I did. Every time I excused myself for a brief break from the overwhelming chatter. Every direct question about costs that made others uncomfortable. Every declined invitation to yet another pre-wedding celebration because I was conserving my social energy. All the while, she was building her case against me. It was a Tuesday evening in April when my phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. I was curled up on my couch with a cup of chamomile tea, unwinding after a long day at the university library where I worked. The rain tapped gently against my apartment windows as I opened the message, expecting another wedding update or question about centerpieces. Instead, what filled my screen was a paragraph that would permanently alter our relationship. "Brooke, I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I need to be honest with you. I don't think it's a good idea for you to be in the wedding party or even attend the ceremony. Jackson's family is extremely important in Dad's industry, and this wedding is essentially a networking event for our parents too. I love you, but you're socially unfit for an occasion of this caliber. Your unpredictable behaviors and awkwardness would draw attention away from the celebration and potentially embarrass us in front of people whose opinions matter. I hope you understand this isn't personal, it's practical. Maybe we can celebrate privately after the honeymoon." I read it once, twice, 3 times. Each time hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less cruel. They didn't. Socially unfit. The phrase burned into my brain, searing away any illusions I still harbored about my place in my sister's life. I sat frozen, my tea growing cold beside me, as a second text appeared. "To be specific, at the engagement party you corrected Jackson's mother about the year her family home was built. At the bridal brunch, you disappeared for 30 minutes without telling anyone because the restaurant was too loud. At the dress fitting, you made that scene about the fabric being unbearable against your skin. These are exactly the kinds of unpredictable behaviors we can't risk during the actual wedding." My hands trembled as I tried to type a response. Delete. Type again. Delete. What could I possibly say? That I was sorry for existing the only way I knew how? That I would pretend to be someone else for her perfect day? Instead, I called my mother, tears streaming down my face, certain that even she would find this exclusion excessive. "Mom," I choked out when she answered, "Ashley just uninvited me from her wedding. She said I'm socially unfit to even attend." The pause before her response told me everything. "Honey," she finally said, her voice carefully measured, "Ashley may have expressed herself harshly, but perhaps she has a point about the pressure of the day. You do get overwhelmed easily, and this wedding is very important for everyone's future. Maybe it would be less stressful for you to skip the ceremony and just attend the small family brunch the next day." The betrayal was complete. My own mother was siding with Ashley. "So you agree with her?" That I'm too embarrassing to be seen at my only sister's wedding. My voice had taken on a strange, hollow quality I didn't recognize. "That's not what I said, Brooke. Don't twist my words. We just want what's best for everyone, including you. You know how you get in crowded, emotional situations." I ended the call shortly after, unable to continue the conversation without completely falling apart. My father called next, his awkward attempt at mediation even more painful than my mother's tacit agreement with Ashley. "Kitten," he said, using my childhood nickname that suddenly felt patronizing, "your sister is under a lot of pressure. The Lewises are very traditional people. Very conventional. You know you've never been conventional, and that's not a bad thing. But maybe for this one day. Maybe for this one day I should cease to exist?" I finished for him. "Because that's what she's asking, Dad. Not for me to dress differently or speak less. She's saying my very presence is unacceptable." He had no answer for that. After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, my mind replaying a lifetime of moments when I'd been made to feel wrong, broken, or insufficient by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Every "why can't you just," and "if only you would," and "everyone else can" that had been thrown at me over the years. In that moment of complete isolation, something snapped inside me. But rather than breaking down, I felt an unexpected clarity emerge from the pain. I took screenshots of Ashley's texts and sent them to my friend Zoe Wallace with a simple message: "I need you." Then I allowed myself to fully feel the rage and grief that had been building for 27 years. I screamed into a pillow until my throat was raw. I threw the special bridesmaid proposal box Ashley had given me months earlier against the wall, watching with grim satisfaction as the carefully curated contents scattered across my floor. For one wild moment, I contemplated showing up at the wedding anyway, making exactly the scene they all feared. But as the initial shock began to fade, I realized that revenge wasn't what I truly wanted. What I needed, desperately, was healing. And distance from the people who couldn't see my worth. 30 minutes after I texted Zoe, my doorbell rang. She stood there in mismatched sweatpants and a hastily thrown-on jacket, holding a bottle of wine and a pint of chocolate ice cream. "I brought the emergency kit," she said, her eyes already blazing with protective fury. "Show me everything." Zoe Wallace had been my best friend since our sophomore year of college, when we were paired as lab partners in an information systems class. Where others found my directness off-putting, Zoe appreciated my honesty. Where others were exhausted by my need for routine, Zoe found it endearing. She was the first person who ever made me feel like I wasn't fundamentally defective. I handed her my phone and watched her expression darken as she read Ashley's messages. "That absolute witch," she muttered, scrolling further. "Socially unfit? Is she casting for a debutante ball or having a wedding? And your parents are backing her up?" She looked up at me, her indignation shifting to concern. "Oh, Brooke. I'm so sorry." For the next several hours, we sat on my living room floor, surrounded by comfort food wrappers, as I poured out every painful detail. Zoe listened, occasionally offering colorful suggestions about what Ashley could do with her caliber wedding. "You could fight this," she said eventually, refilling our wine glasses. "Make a huge family stink. Force them to acknowledge how cruel this is." "And then what?" I asked. "Sit through a wedding where I know I'm not wanted? Where everyone's watching me, waiting for me to do something socially unfit? Or you could completely ghost them. Block everyone's numbers. Don't respond to anything about the wedding." I considered this option, but it didn't feel right either. That still lets them control the narrative. They'll tell everyone I had a meltdown or couldn't handle the attention not being on me. "What do you want to do then?" Zoe asked gently. The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? Not just about the wedding, but about my relationship with my family moving forward. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that I might need to create serious boundaries with the people who had consistently made me feel less than. "I need space," I finally said. "Literal and emotional space. I can't make any decisions while I'm still this hurt." After Zoe left around midnight, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, mind racing with painful thoughts. On impulse, I opened my laptop and typed healing retreats into the search bar. Dozens of options appeared, but one immediately caught my eye: Peace Within Wellness Retreat in Sedona, Arizona. The website showed stunning red rock formations, minimalist accommodations, and a program focused on mindfulness, nature connection, and personal growth. Unlike many similar retreats, this one specifically mentioned being neurodiversity friendly, with options for private accommodations and sensory-considerate programming. I checked the available dates and felt a strange calm settle over me when I saw they had an opening for a week-long retreat that coincided perfectly with Ashley's wedding. It was expensive, almost all of my modest savings, but as I looked at the serene images, something just clicked. At 3:17 a.m., I booked the retreat, putting down the non-refundable deposit before I could second-guess myself. Then I sent a brief email to my supervisor at the library requesting the time off. For the first time since receiving Ashley's text, I felt a flicker of power return. If I wasn't fit for their celebration, I would create my own journey of healing instead. Their rejection would become my redirection. As I finally crawled into bed, physically and emotionally exhausted, I felt something unexpected alongside the pain, a tiny spark of curiosity about what this retreat might bring and who I might become in the process. Word travels quickly in families, especially when it contradicts the preferred narrative. I hadn't planned to tell my parents about the retreat immediately, wanting to process my decision privately first. But Zoe, in her protective enthusiasm, had mentioned it to her mother, who played tennis with my mother's friend Gloria, and within 48 hours, my phone was ringing with Karen Mitchell's special ringtone. I almost didn't answer. Almost. A retreat. My mother's voice carried that particular blend of confusion and disapproval she'd perfected over the years. During your sister's wedding weekend? Brooke, please tell me this is some kind of negotiation tactic. I pressed my fingertips against my temple, already feeling a headache forming. It's not a tactic, Mom. Ashley made it crystal clear I'm not welcome at the wedding. I'm using that time to take care of myself instead. But she didn't mean you couldn't come at all. She was just worried about certain aspects of the ceremony being overwhelming for you. The careful rephrasing made my blood boil. Mom, I have the texts. She said I was socially unfit and would embarrass the family. Those were her exact words. You know how Ashley gets when she's stressed. She's under tremendous pressure with the Lewises breathing down her neck about every detail. She spoke harshly, but you agree with her, I finished. You've made that clear. The conversation continued in circles, my mother alternating between guilt trips. This will break your father's heart, minimization. It was just one thoughtless text. And outright manipulation. If you really loved your sister, you'd understand. When we finally hung up, I felt drained but surprisingly steady in my resolve. The retreat was no longer just a healing space. It had become my declaration of independence. My father called the next day, his approach more direct than my mother's emotional maneuvering. I spoke with Ashley, he said after awkward preliminaries. She feels terrible about how she expressed herself. She says you're making this situation bigger than it needs to be. By refusing to beg for an invitation to my sister's wedding. I asked. By booking this retreat thing instead of working through this as a family. It looks like you're trying to punish her. I laughed without humor. That's interesting, Dad. I'm excluded from a major family event, and somehow I'm the one causing problems by making alternative plans. The timing makes it look intentional, Brooke. It is intentional. I'm intentionally choosing not to sit home alone crying on the day my sister gets married without me. My father sighed, that familiar sound of disappointment I'd heard throughout my childhood. Ashley says if you cancel this retreat, she'll reconsider having you at the ceremony. Not as a bridesmaid, but as a guest. That seems like a reasonable compromise. The audacity was breathtaking. So I can attend if I demonstrate proper contrition first? No thanks. 3 days later, Ashley herself called. I let it go to voicemail, but listened immediately. Brooke, this retreat stunt is exactly the kind of dramatic behavior I was worried about. You're making my wedding about you again. If you just apologized for being difficult during the planning process instead of running away, we could have worked something out. Mom and Dad are upset, Jackson's parents are asking questions, and I'm the one dealing with all of it. Please call me back so we can fix this before you make things worse. I didn't call back. Instead, I drafted a clear, concise email to my immediate family. I will be attending the Peace Within Wellness retreat during the week of May 15th to 22nd. This is not up for discussion or negotiation. I will be turning off my phone during this time to fully engage with the healing process. I wish Ashley and Jackson a beautiful wedding day, and I hope someday you'll understand that this decision is about taking care of myself, not punishing anyone else. I'll be in touch after I return. Brooke, the extended family reactions were mixed and painful. Cousin Taylor sent a sympathetic text, but admitted she couldn't take sides. Uncle Robert wrote a tone-deaf email suggesting I just try harder for one day for Ashley's sake. But two unexpected allies emerged from the fracas. My grandmother Diana, my father's mother, called me directly. I just heard what's happening, she said, her voice carrying the slight tremor of her 80 years, but none of the uncertainty of her son's wavering loyalty. I wanted you to know that I remember what it was like when you were little. You weren't difficult. You were sensitive in a world that isn't made for sensitive people. Tears sprang to my eyes. Thanks, Grandma. Your sister is wrong to exclude you, and your parents are wrong not to stand up for you. I told them as much. She paused. I've also decided I won't be attending the wedding either. Grandma, no, I protested. You shouldn't miss it because of me. I'm 80 years old, dear. I've earned the right to spend my time only with people who know how to love properly. This retreat sounds much more pleasant than watching your sister preen for the country club set anyway. My other surprise defender was Aunt Susan, my mother's younger sister who had always been the family rebel. She sent me a private Facebook message, heard about the wedding drama. Wanted you to know I think you're handling it with more grace than I would. Also, I did a similar retreat in Sedona 2 years ago after my divorce. Life-changing. Bring journals and comfortable shoes. The desert has much to teach you. P.S. Your sister was always a bit of a princess. You're the interesting one. Despite these pockets of support, the weeks leading up to the retreat were a social media minefield. I muted Ashley on all platforms, but mutual friends kept tagging me in comments asking why I wasn't in the bridal shower photos or the bachelorette party videos. I watched from a digital distance as life continued without me, the cake tastings, the final dress fittings, the rehearsal plans. Each excluded moment was both a wound and a confirmation that I'd made the right choice. By the time my departure date approached, I felt hollowed out but determined. I'd gone completely no contact with my immediate family for the final week, focusing instead on preparing for the retreat. The night before my flight, I sat alone in my apartment, looking at old family photos. There was a particular image from Ashley's 16th birthday. She was blowing out candles, radiant in the center of attention, while I stood slightly apart from the gathered crowd, watching her with a mixture of admiration and alienation on my face. I'd never noticed before how much that photo captured our entire relationship dynamic. I carefully placed the pictures back in their box, packed the last of my comfortable clothes and hiking boots, and set my alarm. Tomorrow, while my family was busy with wedding rehearsal activities, I would be flying toward my own kind of ceremony, one of self-reclamation. The Sedona airport was tiny compared to the crowded New York terminals I'd departed from, its modest size immediately lowering my anxiety. As I stepped outside, the dry heat and extraordinary landscape momentarily took my breath away. Massive red rock formations towered against an impossibly blue sky, their rusty hues more vibrant than any photograph could capture. A woman holding a small Peace Within sign waved at me from beside a white van. Brooke, she called. I'm Gabriella, one of the retreat facilitators. Welcome to Sedona. Gabriella had the calm presence of someone completely comfortable in her own skin, something I'd always envied in others. During the drive to the retreat center, she explained that our group was small, just 8 participants, and that the schedule was designed to be both structured and flexible. We understand that different people have different needs, she said, seeming to look right through my carefully composed exterior. Nothing is mandatory. You can always step back or modify any activity to suit your comfort level. The retreat center itself was a collection of adobe buildings nestled against the red rocks, with drought-resistant gardens creating peaceful pathways between structures. My private room was simple but beautiful, a comfortable bed, a small desk by a window with a breathtaking view, and a tiny private patio with a meditation cushion. Despite Gabriella's reassurances, I felt the familiar tension headache forming as dinner approached. New people. New social dynamics to navigate. New opportunities to be socially unfit. I almost stayed in my room, but forced myself to attend, reminding myself that I'd come here to grow, not hide. The dining area was arranged with 2 tables of 4, allowing for conversation without overwhelming noise. Gabriella gently guided introductions, each participant sharing only their name and one word describing what they hoped to find at the retreat. Brooke. Peace, I said when my turn came, surprising myself with the simplicity of what I truly wanted. Around me sat 7 strangers who would become unexpected companions on my journey. Melissa, a recently divorced art teacher in her 40s seeking renewal. Tyler, a burnout tech executive in his 30s pursuing purpose. Amelia, a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who had lost her daughter 2 years earlier, seeking acceptance. James, a retired professor in his 70s looking for reconciliation. Daphne, a cancer survivor in her 30s embracing gratitude. Leo, a former addict in his 40s working toward forgiveness. Kai, a non-binary person in their 20s searching for authenticity. That first evening, we simply shared a quiet meal of fresh, locally sourced food. The conversation was minimal and unforced. No one asked probing personal questions or made demands for performative social engagement. I felt my shoulders gradually relaxing as I realized this space was different from any I'd experienced before. Our days fell into a gentle rhythm. Optional sunrise meditation. Breakfast eaten mostly in contemplative silence. Morning group sessions focused on mindfulness practices. Afternoon free time for hiking, journaling, or individual therapy sessions with the staff counselors. Evening gatherings around a fire pit, weather permitting, or in the cozy common room. On the 3rd day, during a group session focused on family systems, I finally shared my story. I hadn't planned to, the words simply began flowing as Gabriella guided us through an exercise about family roles. I'm here because my sister uninvited me from her wedding, I said, my voice catching. She told me I was socially unfit to attend. My parents didn't defend me. The wedding is happening right now, actually, back in New York. The room fell silent. I braced myself for judgment or, worse, pity. Instead, what I received was something entirely unfamiliar, pure acceptance. Thank you for sharing that, Brooke, Gabriella said. What a painful exclusion to experience. Melissa reached over and briefly touched my hand. Their loss, she said simply. Tyler nodded. Family knows exactly where to aim the arrow, don't they? One by one, the others acknowledged my pain without trying to fix it or explain it away. No one suggested I was overreacting or being too sensitive. No one implied I must have done something to deserve the rejection. They simply witnessed my hurt with compassion. That afternoon, I joined a guided hike through the Red Rocks with James, Amelia, and Kai. As we carefully navigated the terrain, the vastness of the landscape put my personal pain into perspective without diminishing it. These ancient formations had witnessed countless human dramas, yet remained steadfastly themselves through millennia of weathering. Sometimes, our guide Ramon said, the desert teaches us that standing alone does not mean standing incorrectly. The words resonated through me like a tuning fork struck against stone. That evening, I sat on my little patio watching the sunset transform the Red Rocks into fiery beacons. For the first time since Ashley's text, I found myself crying not from hurt, but from release. Something was shifting inside me, creating space where before there had only been constriction. The next day, the actual day of Ashley's wedding, I woke early and checked my phone despite my best intentions. There were several missed calls from my parents and a text from my mother. It's not too late to come. We saved you a seat just in case. The message wasn't an apology or even an acknowledgement of the harm done. It was one final attempt to fit me back into the family narrative on their terms. I turned my phone off completely and joined the sunrise meditation circle. Later that morning, I had my scheduled one-on-one session with Gabriella. She listened attentively as I processed my feelings about the wedding happening without me. What surprises you most about how you feel today? She asked. I considered the question carefully. That I don't feel jealous or regretful. I feel peaceful. Like I'm exactly where I need to be. She smiled. That's a powerful realization. What does that tell you? That maybe I've been trying to belong in places that were never meant for me. That afternoon, while Ashley was saying her vows 3,000 miles away, I was sitting by a small creek, writing in my journal. I filled pages with insights about patterns I'd never noticed before, how I'd internalized my family's judgment and learned to see myself through their critical lens. How I'd spent years contorting myself to fit into spaces that were fundamentally uncomfortable. How I'd come to believe that the problem was inherently me, rather than a mismatch between my authentic self and certain environments. When I returned to the retreat center, there was a message from Zoe with several photos attached. She'd been invited to the wedding as a friend of both of us and had decided to attend partly to support my parents, who she genuinely liked, and partly, as she put it, for reconnaissance. The images showed my sister looking conventionally beautiful in her designer gown, my parents smiling stiffly beside the new couple, the elaborate floral arrangements and ice sculptures and champagne fountain. Everything looked perfect, polished, and utterly impersonal. "Everyone keeps asking where you are," Zoe had written. "Your mom is telling people you had a prior commitment you couldn't break. Your dad looks miserable. Ashley seems completely in her element with Jackson's country club crowd. You're not missing anything authentic. How's the desert?" I sent back a photo of myself from the hike, red dust on my hiking boots, hair wild from the wind, smiling genuinely in a way I rarely did in family photos. "Finding my peace," I replied. "Tell you everything when I'm back." As the retreat continued, I formed unexpected connections with my fellow participants. During an art therapy session, Melissa and I discovered we both processed emotions through color in similar ways. Tyler and I bonded over our shared love of systems and order. James became a grandfatherly presence, offering wisdom without imposition. On our second-to-last evening, the retreat held a release ceremony. We each wrote down limiting beliefs and painful memories on biodegradable paper, then released them into a fire while speaking aloud our intentions for moving forward. When my turn came, I stepped forward and read what I'd written. I released the belief that I am socially unfit. I am differently wired, not defective. I released the need for approval from those who cannot see my value. I released the pattern of shrinking myself to fit others' expectations. I step forward into authentic connection with those who can appreciate me exactly as I am. As the paper curled and blackened in the flames, I felt something final and necessary burning away with it. On our last morning, I wrote a letter to my family that I had no intention of sending. The words were for me alone, a way of clarifying my boundaries moving forward. Then I joined the closing circle, where each participant shared one insight they were taking home. "I've learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict," I said when my turn came. "It's the presence of self-acceptance, even in the midst of others' disapproval." As we said our goodbyes, exchanging contact information and promises to stay connected, I realized I'd experienced more genuine connection in 1 week with these strangers than in years of family gatherings where I'd nominally belonged. The return journey to New York felt different. I was returning to the same physical space, but not the same internal landscape. Something fundamental had shifted during my time in the desert, not a dramatic transformation, but a quiet reclamation of truth. As the plane began its descent into JFK, I turned my phone back on, bracing for the inevitable barrage. Instead of dreading it, however, I felt curiously detached, as if watching the drama from a new, more grounded perspective. Zoe was waiting for me at the airport arrivals area, bouncing on her toes with barely contained curiosity. "Oh my God," she said, studying my face after our hug. "You look different. Do I have a desert sunburn?" I laughed, touching my cheeks. "No, it's not that." She tilted her head. "You look, I don't know, more solid somehow? Like you're fully occupying your own skin." It was an odd observation, but strangely accurate to how I felt. The retreat hadn't erased my neurodivergent traits or magically solved all my problems. I still flinched at the airport's cacophony and felt the familiar tension headache forming. But something had fundamentally shifted in how I related to these experiences. Instead of shame, I felt simple acknowledgement. This is how my system works. It's not wrong, just different. In Zoe's car, I gave her the full retreat rundown. The breathtaking landscape, the mindfulness practices, the unexpected connections with my fellow participants. She listened eagerly, occasionally interjecting with commentary about the wedding I'd missed. "Your cousin Taylor asked about you," she reported. I think she felt genuinely bad about the situation. "Oh, and your grandmother was amazing," she told everyone who asked that she was boycotting in solidarity with Brooke. "Your mom looked like she'd swallowed a lemon every time." I smiled at the image of my fierce octogenarian grandmother making waves. And Ashley? Completely in her element. The perfect bride in her perfect wedding marrying her perfect husband. Zoe rolled her eyes. Although, there was this moment during the reception. I was getting a drink at the bar and I overheard her talking to one of her bridesmaids. She asked if they'd seen you post anything online about where you were. When they said no, she seemed, I don't know, deflated somehow? Like she'd been checking. I considered this information. Had Ashley expected me to publicly melt down? To post passive-aggressive comments about being excluded? The thought that I'd simply gone on with my life, finding joy elsewhere, had apparently not figured into her calculations. Back at my apartment, I unpacked slowly, integrating retreat items with my everyday life. The journal now half filled with insights, the smooth stone I'd carried on hikes, the handmade bracelet Amelia had given each of us during our farewell gathering. That evening, I posted a carefully curated selection of retreat photos on Instagram, stunning Sedona landscapes, a group shot of our retreat circle with faces joyful but serene, a beautiful image of my shadow stretching across red rocks at sunset. My caption was simple. Spent a transformative week at peace within wellness retreat in Sedona. Found connection, clarity, and yes, peace within. Sometimes the unexpected path leads exactly where you need to go. #authenticity, #healing, #self-discovery. I didn't directly reference the wedding or my exclusion from it. I didn't need to. The timing spoke volumes to anyone who knew the situation. The post received more engagement than anything I'd shared in years. Supportive comments poured in, many from acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in ages. Several people messaged privately to share their own family exclusion stories. A college friend even asked for the retreat information, saying she'd been considering something similar after her own family conflicts. My parents' reactions were predictably divided. My father texted a cautious, "Glad you had a good trip. We missed you." My mother called 3 times before leaving a voicemail that expertly blended guilt and curiosity. "The wedding was beautiful, but not the same without you. I hope this retreat thing gave you whatever you were looking for. Call me when you're ready to move past all this." I didn't call immediately. Instead, I spent the following days re-establishing my routine while integrating practices from the retreat. I started each morning with a short meditation. I took lunch breaks outside instead of at my desk. I scheduled regular video chats with Melissa and Tyler, who'd become unexpected friends. I began researching local support groups for neurodivergent adults. 5 days after the wedding, while I was shelving books at the university library, my phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. Our first communication since before the retreat. "Got back from honeymoon yesterday. Saw your retreat pictures. Looks nice. We should talk when things settle down." No apology. No acknowledgement of harm done. Just a casual message as if she'd merely forgotten to include me on a dinner invitation rather than explicitly told me I was unfit to attend her wedding. I considered not responding at all, but Gabriella's voice echoed in my mind. Boundaries aren't about punishing others, they're about honoring yourself. So I replied simply, "I'm glad your wedding and honeymoon went well. I'm open to talking when you're ready to acknowledge what happened and how it affected me." 3 days of silence followed. Then, I said what I needed to say to protect my wedding day. "You're turning this into a bigger deal than it was. But if you need me to say sorry to move forward, then fine. I'm sorry you felt hurt." I actually laughed out loud in the middle of the reference section, earning a few curious glances from nearby students. The non-apology was so perfectly Ashley. Simultaneously dismissive and self-centered while couched as conciliation. This time, I didn't respond immediately. I sat with the message for a full day, consulting with my new therapist, another positive outcome of the retreat, about the healthiest way to engage. Finally, I wrote back, I'm not looking for an apology that doesn't recognize the actual harm done. I'm setting a boundary that I'll only discuss moving forward when you're genuinely ready to talk about why telling someone they're socially unfit to attend a family event is deeply hurtful. I love you, Ashley, but I'm no longer willing to accept being treated as an embarrassment or inconvenience. Ashley's response was swift and defensive. This is exactly the kind of dramatic overreaction I was trying to avoid at the wedding. I put my phone away without responding further. The old Brooke would have engaged in this circular argument, desperate to make Ashley understand my perspective. The new Brooke recognized that wasn't my responsibility. I'd stated my boundary clearly. The ball was in her court. Meanwhile, my parents had begun their own awkward reconciliation attempts. My mother suggested Sunday dinner to catch up properly. My father sent an email asking if I'd like to attend a concert series we'd enjoyed together in previous summers. I accepted both invitations with clear parameters. I'd love to come to dinner, but I need your assurance that we can have an honest conversation about recent events rather than pretending everything is fine. The concert sounds wonderful. I want to be clear that I'm still processing what happened with Ashley and the wedding, and I may need to talk about that with you at some point. Setting these boundaries felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Each time I advocated for my needs without apology, I was honoring the insights from the retreat, that my differences weren't character flaws, and that healthy relationships required mutual respect, not just tolerance. 3 weeks after returning from Sedona, I received an unexpected job offer from the university's Special Collections Department. The position involved less public-facing work and more cataloging and research. Tasks perfectly suited to my detail-oriented nature and preference for quieter environments. For the first time, I felt like my neurodivergent traits were being seen as potential assets rather than liabilities to be managed. That evening, I video chatted with the retreat group, who had maintained our connection through a private messaging thread. As I shared my news, their genuine celebration reminded me that authentic connection was possible, with people who appreciated rather than merely tolerated my differences. The universe has interesting timing, Gabriella commented when I mentioned the job coinciding with all the family tension. How so? I asked. Sometimes we need to release what isn't serving us before we can receive what will help us thrive. As I prepared for the upcoming family dinner, the first time I would see my parents in person since before the wedding, I reflected on this wisdom. By setting boundaries around how I deserve to be treated, I was creating space for more authentic relationships, both within my family and beyond it. The journey was far from complete. There would be uncomfortable conversations ahead, potential setbacks, and certainly more learning. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I was approaching these challenges from a place of self-acceptance rather than self-doubt. I was socially different, not socially unfit. And that difference was no longer something I felt compelled to apologize for. The invitation to Sunday dinner came exactly 3 weeks after Ashley and Jackson returned from their honeymoon. My mother called personally, her voice carrying that careful neutrality that signaled she was trying very hard to pretend everything was normal. We thought it would be nice to have a small family gathering, she said. Just us, your father, Ashley, and Jackson. To reconnect. The old Brooke would have agreed immediately, desperate to smooth things over and regain family approval. The new Brooke took a deep breath and asked, will we be addressing what happened with the wedding, or is this meant to be a forget and move forward dinner? The silence that followed told me my mother hadn't expected this directness. Well, I think we all have things to discuss, she finally said. But let's not make it confrontational, I agreed to come but spent the next 3 days preparing with my therapist, Dr. Winters. We role-played potential scenarios and practiced calm, clear statements I could use if conversations became defensive or dismissive. Remember, Dr. Winters said during our session, you can't control how they respond, only how you express yourself. Your goal isn't to make them admit they were wrong, it's to advocate for your needs moving forward. On Sunday afternoon, I stood in front of my closet, considering what to wear. For family gatherings in the past, I'd always chosen outfits that my mother deemed appropriate, subdued colors, conventional styles, nothing that would draw attention or comment. Today, I deliberately selected clothes that represented my authentic self. Comfortable dark jeans that didn't irritate my sensitive skin, a soft blue button-down that brought out my eyes, and my favorite handcrafted silver earrings from an artist I discovered in Sedona. I arrived at my parents' suburban home precisely on time, carrying a small potted succulent as a hostess gift, another Sedona influence. Taking a final centering breath in the car, I reminded myself that I was no longer seeking their approval. I was offering them the opportunity to connect with my true self. My father opened the door, his smile both genuine and nervous. "Kitten," he said, using my childhood nickname before catching himself. "Brooke, you look, well, the desert agreed with you." The house smelled of my mother's signature pot roast and lemon polish. Some things never changed. In the living room, my mother fussed with flower arrangements while Ashley and Jackson sat stiffly on the sofa, cocktails already in hand. The tableau was so perfectly composed it could have been a magazine spread on upper-middle-class family life. "Brooke," Ashley said, her tone measured as she stood to air-kiss my cheek. "Good to see you." Jackson nodded politely beside her. We'd met several times before, but I'd always sensed his discomfort around me. Today was no different. "Congratulations on your marriage," I said simply. "I hope the honeymoon was wonderful." My mother jumped in with excessive enthusiasm. "They went to the Maldives. The pictures are absolutely stunning. Ashley, show Brooke the sunset photos on that little island you visited." And so it began. The Mitchell family's specialty of speaking around difficult topics rather than addressing them directly. For the first 15 minutes, we performed this familiar dance, admiring honeymoon photos, discussing the unseasonably warm weather, my father explaining his new golf club membership. It was during the first lull in conversation, as my mother disappeared to check on dinner, that I decided to break the pattern. "I want to thank you all for inviting me today," I said calmly. "I know things have been tense since the wedding situation, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk in person." The room went silent. Ashley's posture stiffened. Jackson suddenly became very interested in his cocktail. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Brooke, perhaps we could just enjoy a nice family dinner without diving into all that right away," he suggested. I met his gaze steadily. "Dad, I came today specifically because I was told we would address what happened." "If that's not actually the plan, I should know now." My mother returned just in time to hear this exchange, her face tightening with anxiety. "Let's not create tension before we've even had dinner," she said, her laugh brittle. "Everything's ready, shall we move to the dining room?" I remained seated. "Mom, I understand this is uncomfortable, but pretending nothing happened isn't going to help us move forward as a family." I was explicitly uninvited from Ashley's wedding because I was deemed socially unfit. That hurt deeply, and ignoring it won't make it go away. Ashley sighed dramatically. "Here we go," she muttered to Jackson. "What does that mean, Ashley?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the anger flaring in my chest. "It means you're doing exactly what I was worried about, making everything about your feelings and your needs, just like always." Before I could respond, Jackson stood abruptly. "I think I'll help Karen in the kitchen," he said, making a hasty exit. My father looked torn between following him and mediating the brewing confrontation. He chose an uncomfortable middle ground, perching on the edge of his armchair like he might need to intervene physically. "Ashley," I said after taking a steadying breath, "I understand the wedding was your day. What I don't understand is why my presence would have been so detrimental that excluding me entirely seemed like the only option." "You know how you get," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You get overwhelmed, you disappear for breaks, you say inappropriate things without realizing it. Jackson's family is extremely traditional and influential. I couldn't risk any incidents." "Incidents," I repeated. "You mean me being myself?" "I mean you being difficult," she countered. "And look how you're proving my point right now, making this huge dramatic scene instead of just letting us have a nice family dinner. Is asking to discuss a significant family conflict really making a huge dramatic scene?" I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like a reasonable adult conversation. My mother reappeared in the doorway. "Dinner's getting cold," she announced with forced cheerfulness. "Let's table this discussion for now, shall we?" "No," I said quietly but firmly. "I need to say something first." All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from exasperation to apprehension. I spent years believing something was fundamentally wrong with me because that's what this family consistently communicated. But I've realized that I'm not defective, I'm different. My brain works differently. I process sensory information differently. I communicate differently. And those differences are not character flaws or personal failings. I paused, noting with surprise that everyone was actually listening. Being excluded from Ashley's wedding hurt terribly. But it also forced me to confront how I've allowed myself to be defined by your perceptions rather than my own self-knowledge. I went to Sedona not to spite anyone, but to heal. And I did. I connected with people who value me exactly as I am. I learned tools to navigate a world that isn't designed for minds like mine. I discovered that I don't have to constantly apologize for existing in my authentic way. My father was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something between surprise and perhaps a hint of pride. My mother looked pained but attentive. Ashley's face remained carefully neutral. "I'm not here to demand apologies or assign blame," I continued. "I'm here because despite everything, I love this family and hope we can build healthier relationships moving forward. But that can only happen if we're honest about where we've been." When I finished speaking, the silence that followed felt different from the tense, awkward pauses that usually punctuated our family conflicts. This silence had a quality of absorption, as if my words were actually being considered rather than merely endured. Finally, my father spoke. "Brooke, I think we haven't always understood you very well. And maybe we haven't tried hard enough to." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a cocktail napkin. "We just wanted you to fit in, to have an easier life. Maybe we focused too much on changing you instead of accepting you." Their words weren't perfect, but they were perhaps the most honest acknowledgement I'd ever received from them. Ashley remained silent, her expression complex. When she finally spoke, her voice lacked its usual defensive edge. "I was under so much pressure," she said quietly. "The Lewises had expectations. Jackson's mother was micromanaging everything. I was trying to create this perfect day and I think I scapegoated you. It was easier to exclude you than to stand up to everyone else's expectations." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was the closest thing to vulnerability I'd heard from my sister in years. "Thank you for being honest," I said. "That helps me understand better." My mother, ever practical, seized the moment of decreased tension. "Now, can we please eat before everything is completely ruined?" The dinner that followed wasn't magical. Conversations still occasionally veered into uncomfortable territory. Ashley still made a few comments that revealed how far we had to go. But there was also a new quality to our interactions, a tentative authenticity that had been missing for as long as I could remember. When Jackson asked about my retreat experience, seemingly genuinely curious, I described the red rock formations and meditation practices without filtering or downplaying my enthusiasm. When my mother mentioned a neighbor's daughter who was having similar issues, I gently corrected her terminology rather than letting it pass to avoid conflict. As the evening drew to a close, I declined my parents' invitation to stay for dessert, explaining that I needed to decompress after the emotional conversation, a boundary I would have previously been too anxious to set. "I'd like to do this again," I said at the door. "Maybe next time we could try an activity that doesn't involve sitting and making conversation the entire time. I've learned that I connect better with people when we're doing something side by side." My father nodded thoughtfully. "There's a new botanical garden exhibit I've been wanting to see. Maybe next weekend?" The suggestion, so considerate of my preferences, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I'd like that very much." In the months that followed, our family relationships evolved gradually. There were setbacks and old patterns that emerged under stress. My mother still occasionally sent me articles about overcoming social anxiety that missed the point entirely. My father still sometimes shushed me when my directness made others uncomfortable. Ashley and I maintained a more distant relationship than before, though with greater honesty in our limited interactions. But there were also meaningful changes. My parents made efforts to create more sensory-friendly family gatherings. My father began asking questions about my experience rather than assuming he understood it. My mother, in her own way, became somewhat protective of me in extended family settings. Meanwhile, my own life flourished in unexpected directions. The retreat friendships deepened, with Melissa and Tyler becoming regular fixtures in my life. The special collections position at the university leveraged my natural strengths and accommodated my sensory needs. I even began a small volunteer role at a local organization supporting neurodivergent youth, sharing insights from my own journey. 6 months after the wedding, Ashley called to tell me she was pregnant. After the initial congratulations, she said something that genuinely surprised me. "I've been thinking," she said hesitantly, "about how I want to raise this child. And I don't want them to ever feel the way you felt growing up, like there was something wrong with them for being who they are." It wasn't a full reckoning with the past, but it was perhaps the beginning of one. As I reflect on the journey from exclusion to self-acceptance, I realize that Ashley's cruel text ultimately gave me an unexpected gift. Being labeled socially unfit forced me to confront the ways I'd internalized others' perceptions. The peace I found wasn't despite the rejection, but because of how it pushed me to seek healing on my own terms. I still have days when social situations overwhelm me. I still sometimes say things too directly or miss subtle cues. I still need breaks and quiet spaces and understanding. The difference is that I no longer see these needs as flaws to apologize for, but simply as aspects of who I am, a unique, worthy individual who experiences the world in her own valid way. If you've ever felt excluded for being different, please know that there's nothing wrong with you. The right people will value your authentic self, not despite your differences, but because of the perspective and depth they bring. You aren't socially unfit, you're uniquely fitted for connections that honor your true nature. I'd love to hear your stories of finding acceptance, whether from others or within yourself. Drop them in the comments below, and please like and subscribe if this journey resonated with you. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their differences are not defects. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember that sometimes the path to peace begins with the courage to be exactly who you are.